The following podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. While we aim to provide helpful insights, listeners and viewers should seek their own independent legal advice for specific issues or concerns. Neither the host nor any guests can be held legally responsible for any decisions or actions taken based on the content of this podcast.
Hello, welcome to the Housing Sector Podcast. Today I am talking to Sophie from Anthony Gold, and a conversation that came up a while back about retrofitting properties. It was Martin Donkin who I was speaking to. And I think retrofitting is a good idea, don't you, Sophie?
It can absolutely be a good idea, yes. So shall I start off just by introducing myself first?
Yes, please do that, yes.
So first of all, thanks so much for having me on, Ben. I'm Sophie Ait-Tayeb. I'm a paralegal at Anthony Gold Solicitors. We're a leading law firm based in London, and I sit in a team that specialises in housing law. We've got a particular expertise when it comes to legal issues affecting social housing tenants. So we deal with lots of disrepair and housing conditions claims, which will be very relevant to our conversation today about retrofitting. I did just want to do a little disclaimer that everything I'm talking about on this episode today is just for general information, does not qualify as legal advice. But if any kind of listeners are thinking, our conversation is very relatable and they did want to get legal advice, we've got a fantastic team of qualified solicitors. So I do invite listeners to contact us. If we're not the right firm for you, there's also the Find a Solicitors page on the Law Society website, which is a great starting point if you did want to get some legal assistance.
And I will add the intro that I have when we discuss legal things at the beginning, so people have got that, so we're all covered. And just to make people aware, I am not being paid for this podcast. This is just you and I having a conversation. And as you so rightly said, there are other law firms out there, should you write. But we're having a conversation today because, again, and retrofitting is the topic of the day, isn't it? And thank you for that great introduction. You're clearly qualified to talk about the subject that we have. And again, it's just for guidance. But so, Sophie, yeah, retrofitting. It can only be a good thing. We're using old stock, we're modifying, we're making it up to modern standards. It's a good thing, right?
Yeah, so retrofitting basically works to upgrade an existing building, and usually the sort of main goal of retrofitting is to improve the thermal efficiency of a building. So it's playing a very big part in tackling fuel poverty, climate change, creating sustainable housing stock. So in theory, it should be an excellent thing. And social housing landlords in particular are rolling this out in their commitment to decarbonise their housing stock and comply with net zero targets.
So we're not just talking about also extending buildings, because the issue with Martin was that they built on top of his flat, wasn't it? So it could also be perhaps wall cavities, doing something different there, and you say heat pumps. So it could be quite a small adjustment or a major one.
Yes, so I've got a few examples of things that could be done as part of retrofit works. It will vary depending on what kind of program you're on and the property you have, but common thing will be external wall insulation, replacing windows, double glazing, maybe adding a roof, upgrading hot water and heating systems. So usually heat pumps are quite the common thing that will be installed.
Okay, so when this works, it works well. It's good for the resident, it's good for the tenant, it's good for the customer, whatever generic noun we're using to collect them in here. And it's going to, in the end, be good for the stock. So it's good for the housing association.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So what's the problem?
So things could go wrong with retrofit works. So what I wanted to sort of talk about today is, let's say you've had retrofit works carried out to your property. Maybe you're initially thrilled, maybe you weren't. And then retrofit works are finished and they've gone terribly wrong. Your property is now worse off than it was before. I wanted to kind of sort of discuss sort of ways they go wrong, why they go wrong. And then as a social housing tenant, what can you do when that situation arises? So when retrofit works go wrong, that can have an absolutely disastrous impact on your property. So I think I saw on Inside Housing that in January, 39 firms were suspended from installing home insulation under a government scheme because works weren't done properly. And the government now has recently launched an advisory panel to look into poor retrofit work. So it is an issue. And I've even seen myself, you can have a sort of scroll on LinkedIn and you can see tenants sort of voicing their own kind of negative experiences of retrofitting. So examples of things that can go with retrofit works. So it could be where a property has had insulation added, but then no ventilation to kind of make up for any of that lost airflow. So then they've got, the sort of moisture trapped inside, lots of damp and mold now arising. Patchy insulation could be another example. So they've not bothered to kind of insulate the entire property. They've kind of missed out bits. So now you've got cold spots in your home that's attracting loads of damp and mold. It could be ignoring a building structure as well. So certain old properties actually need to breathe. So just kind of throwing on insulation onto that property without properly considering, what kind of property you're retrofitting can kind of cause issues. So with properties that need to breathe, if you insulate it, that can sort of trap moisture inside and then lead to rotting and damaging the actual building. Heavy materials to a weak building can be an issue, and just general poor workmanship and unfinished jobs. So leaving wires hanging, sort of, defective windows at the end. So these are examples of what can go wrong with retrofit works.
So Lisa Mallion, who would be, she's been on before talking about damp and mold, and she surprised me when we were talking about how buildings need to breathe. You need to let that to stop that damp and mold getting in. Now, I'm also aware that, we're sort of retrofitting some pumps to help reduce damp and mold. Are they good things? Is that a quick, easy fix, or are they benefiting the communities?
Sorry, you're talking about heat pumps.
There's the heat pumps, but there's also pumps to filter the air around.
Okay, yeah. So this is the thing. So it will depend on the property. They're just basically that with retrofitting, it's not a one size fits all. So whatever works you do to retrofit a property, there needs to be serious consideration of, if you add insulation, for example, what else do you need to add? You need to add pumps or ventilation to kind of make up for it. It's work that needs to be taken really, really seriously to make sure that there's no unintended consequences. Now, there is a guidance that local authorities are supposed to follow when they carry out retrofit work. So usually to fund retrofit works, local authorities will get a grant from central government. So beforehand, it was one called the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, which has now been replaced. I think the new name for it is called the Warm Homes Social Housing Fund. So usually a condition of that grant is they've got to follow something called PAS 2035. So that stands for Publicly Available Specification 2035. It's available online. You can just Google it and pull up a PDF of it. And it's essentially official guidance on how retrofit works should be carried out. So in theory, when local authorities are carrying out retrofit works, they need to kind of follow this guidance to avoid any unintended consequences like damp, poorly carried out works, unfinished jobs. Now, that document, so that PAS 2035, is just guidance. It's not legislation. It's just a guidance document of what they have to follow. So it's very difficult to enforce in practice, which is why even though local authorities are supposed to follow PAS 2035, sometimes they don't. And so sometimes they do things like insulate without them putting in, a pump or whatever it is that will help kind of prevent any issues. And that's sort of part of the reason why retrofit works can go wrong.
Now, what if my housing provider comes to me and say, we're going to fit these pumps in all of our homes, be it a heat pump or to remove damp and mold, and I go, well, actually, I don't like the sound of that. I don't trust you to do the work, and I don't like the idea. I don't think these pumps are effective. Can I say no?
Yeah, so I was having a think about this. So in theory, there should be communication. And I think that's set out in PAS 2035. So it's a really interesting document, I think, to have a read through, especially for someone that's going through retrofit works. Your landlord is entitled to carry out works. So I think generally it probably would be difficult to say no. But I'd say if you sort of didn't trust them or you sort of weren't sure about letting them, I would say in that situation to get some legal assistance.
And would that be something that Anthony Gold could support with?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Although there are other law firms out there,
Absolutely, absolutely.
should people wish to
And
go
there
through.
also aren't, it doesn't have to necessarily be law firms either. There's also brilliant organizations like Shelter or have citizens advice that you can kind of go to for that initial help as
Yeah.
well.
Okay. Well, look, we're not digging our heels in and saying, it's all bad. But what, in your experience, what seems to be the big tripping curves? What are the problems?
So it's the problems I set out above about the sort of poorly conducted works. So insulations without ventilation, patch insulation. I mentioned that sometimes local authorities, they don't stick to past 2035, and that might be why things go wrong. I've got a few other examples of how things can go wrong or why things go wrong. So using cheap contractors, inadequate surveys before carrying out retrofit works. They don't, they're very
Yeah.
rushed. They don't actually properly consider the property. Some properties aren't fit for retrofit works as well. It's just not suitable for some properties, especially the sort of older types. And I think crucially, most importantly, it's landlords just not listening to their tenants.
Right.
So, a tenant saying, this is going to go wrong, or I'm having issues with my heat pumps, and landlords just completely ignoring them.
Okay, and that's where we start to get into the sort of recourse of things. So, if I have been
Mm.
mistreated, if it's taken too long or it's damaged my property, I mean, I'm assuming that for all the disruptions that are going on, I'm still paying a service charge throughout this.
So yes, so I'm sort of looking at this from the angle of social housing tenants as well. But I can set out so your sort of main rights when things do go wrong. So I'd say you've got three kind of main rights out under housing law when it comes to retrofit works being done poorly. So the first one is the Fitness for Human Habitation Act 2018. So if your property is unfit for human habitation, then your landlord is obligated to address that. They need to address those issues and bring it up to a fit standard. So let's say you've had poorly carried out retrofit works, your property's been insulated, no ventilation's been added, and now you've got poor ventilation. It's excessively hot in the summertime. You've now got mold and damp. Your property could be unfit for human habitation. And if that's the case, then your landlord has to address that. They have to fix that issue. So that's the sort of one of the sort of key rights you've got as a social housing tenant. The other thing you've got is general sort of repair rights. So that's under Section 11 of the Landlord and Tenant Act 1985. So your landlord is under a legal obligation to keep in repair the structure and exterior of the property and to keep any key installations in proper working order. So that usually includes things like heating, hot water sanitation, electricity and gas, water systems. So let's say you've had retrofit works and you've got a dodgy heat pump. It's not working. You can't go a month without heating going off. Then your heat pump isn't in proper working order and your landlord's got to go fix that now, whether it be by replacement or, fixing it so it stops breaking down. Could be faulty windows. So you've had new windows put in, it's hanging off the hinges, the handle doesn't close, or it's always falling off, it doesn't lock. That's something that your landlord, it's probably likely they have to address it. They've got to fix that.
Yeah. Okay. So there's obviously a real human cost to this as well. And do we find that many tenants just simply don't know their rights? Well, we know the answer that they don't, but how can we help support those residents that don't know about this legislation, that don't know about Section 11?
Well, I think things like this podcast are absolutely brilliant for that. So that's why I'm really excited to be invited on. And I've seen your other podcast episode, and I think it's absolutely brilliant what you're doing. So that's one way of doing it. So I know our firm, we host sometimes workshops and events to kind of empower tenants and kind of sort of take them through their housing rights. I would say as well, Shelter, I've referred to them earlier, but they've got loads of really useful resources all about the Human Habitation Act, sort of disrepair rights. They've even like precedent letters on Shelter. So I think, yeah, just sort of having more podcasts and mediums like this, events, and using kind of organizations that really stand up for social housing tenants' rights,
And
that will really help.
we're growing in numbers, which is great to see. We're getting away from that echo chamber of everything being all right and everything's okay as long as we look the other way. So yeah, and thank you for your kind words. Something else I'm great at. So how long does it take ordinarily if I've come to you with, and let's get away from the sort of, it's
Okay.
a hole in my roof now that has been caused by some external work. How long would it take me to go through the sort of thing with yourselves in support?
It varies really. It's very hard to answer that because it will vary from case by case. But generally, disrepair and housing conditions claims they can go on between sort of a few months to a few years
Mhm.
in terms of actually taking legal action. So it really can vary. It's hard to kind of say a specific time frame.
No, and sorry, it wasn't great for me to ask that question and to put that pressure on you, and you're right not to answer that way. I get contacted by a lot of disrepair lawyers who are saying, oh, we can get you claims for this and claims for that, and they tend to only be interested if there's a multitude of problems and a big payout. Should people be wary of them?
Um, what I would say is do your research before contacting or kind of speaking with a firm. So there's lots of useful online resources. So Legal 500 is great. If you just type in a law firm's name on Legal 500, it will sort of, there's like normally like tier rankings. So just to plug Anthony Gold, we're tier 1 for social housing tenants. But I'd say do your research first. There's lots of online material about firms. Go on their website, but also look at kind of like I said, Legal 500 or Chambers as well. It's really good.
And I'll put lots of links and comments and QR
Yes.
codes as I always do here, and we'll do that. And we're happy to share your contact details. I'm assuming that's okay.
Yes.
All right, we can do that. Look, we always like to talk about the human impact because I think that gets
Mm.
lost a lot of the time. And as your role as a paralegal, are you sort of speaking to a lot of the people that this is affecting? Are you in the sort of front line?
Yes. Yes, definitely.
And what's your experience of that?
I, yeah, I think usually by the time people contact us, it's already been going on for years. So they've complained multiple times. They've gone through, they've had to sort of sit on the phone for absolutely ages. They've exhausted absolutely every avenue of making a complaint. So I find it is absolutely exhausting for tenants to go through, and I think it's very emotionally exhausting.
And does that rub off on you? I mean, it must be emotionally quite tiring for yourself to listen to these stories.
Yeah, but sort of it's sort of my job, I guess, to kind of not be. I think something it's it's really important, I think, as a social housing tenant that you don't give up. If that even though you've exhausted every avenue, you have a right to a safe, good home. I think it's really important that you don't give up on that. So although I feel lots of empathy and it is kind of hard to hear, I do feel, I'm ready to push on, if that makes sense. Because yeah, you shouldn't give up. Keep going, essentially, is what I'd say.
Good for you. Girl
Yeah.
after my own heart in that respect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They will go to lots to try and stop you and to keep it internalized within their own policies. But yeah, no, there is support out there and there's lots of people. Will you send me a load of links that I can put in the
Absolutely.
description so we've
Yeah.
got that? And I think your advice to people there is don't give up. It's great. We do have a right to live in a home that is warm, safe, affordable. Yeah. Look, keep up the great work. We'll have you back if you'd like to come back. That would be lovely to talk
Sure.
about your work, how it's going, and maybe we can pick on some cases and sort of dig into the detail of that and how that worked.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Yeah.
All right. Well, look, it's been lovely talking to you today. Thank you very much, Sophie.
No problem at all. Lovely speaking with you.